Hello, and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. I bet you didn't think there'd be another episode before Christmas Day, but you'd be wrong, because there is, and here we are. If you haven't already, I'd suggest you go back and listen to the Christmas special episode with Kaif Keating. I had a great time doing that podcast with Kaif. He was a brilliant guest, very funny, and also informative, which are two great attributes. So go back and have a listen. Anyway, today we're back on the sonnets, and we are looking at Sonnet 36. And if you can't remember what happened in the previous couple of sonnets, let me tell you, Shakespeare, he's in a potentially abusive relationship. His partner is potentially cheating on him with another person, and it's caused Shakespeare to write a series of sonnets saying how pissed off he is, but also how much he still loves the recipient of the sonnets. So he's in a bit of turmoil because on one hand he's being cheated on and he's being sort of taken advantage of, but on the other he still loves the person. It's a classic predicament that happens in relationships all the time, throughout the years. See, Shakespeare can be very relevant sometimes. So let's have a listen to Sonnet 36. Sonnet 36. Let me confess that we two must be twain, although our individual loves are one. So shall those blots that do with me remain without thy help by me be borne alone. In our two loves there is but one respect, though in our lives a separate spite, which, though it alter not love's sole effect, yet doth it steal sweet hours from love's delight. I may not evermore acknowledge thee, lest my bewailed guilt should do thee shame, nor thou with public kindness honour me, unless thou take that honour from thy name. But do not so. I love thee in such sort, as, thou being mine, mine is thy good report. Well, this feels a bit like a sort of breakup text, doesn't it? It's Shakespeare saying, look, we can't be together anymore. But there's a few curveballs in there, because in the previous sonnets I thought the recipient of the poems is the one to blame for whatever the hell happened. Maybe he cheated on Shakespeare, maybe he was just generally quite toxic. But in this one, Shakespeare's saying, you know, I've done some bad things. So he hasn't been talking about that in the previous sonnets, has he? He's kept that under wraps. Or maybe, you know, in the timeline, he's been sort of messed about with by the recipient of the poem, and he's had enough, so he's gone and done something bad himself, which I'm pretty sure most relationship therapists would advise against. I mean, I'm not a therapist, but I imagine they don't say that retaliation and getting your own back on your partner is a good thing. But maybe back then that is how they did it. Maybe that was considered the best thing to do. And obviously relationship therapists were a big thing in the 1500s. They were thriving. Right, let's break down Sonnet 36 and work out what the hell Shakespeare was going on about in this one. Let me confess that we two must be twain, although our individual loves are one. So this is pretty straightforward and quite to the point, isn't it? As an opening couple of lines, he's saying, look, we've got to break up, mate. It's not working, even though we are quite clearly in love. Then he continues with, so shall those blots that do with me remain without thy help by me be borne alone. Now this is a slightly left field thing for Shakespeare to say, I think. So I think he's saying we need to break up so that the blots on our relationship, the bad things that have happened in our relationship, just remain with me and for me to bear without any help from you. Which is weird. I mean, what's he talking about there? I mean, is he saying I need to go away and deal with the bad things that have happened myself and take responsibility for for that myself without your help and without your support. It sounds a bit like that. And then the next section is all sort of one thought, so I'm going to drive through. In our two loves there is but one respect, though in our lives a separable spite, which, though it alter not love's sole effect, yet doth it steal sweet hours from love's delight. So here he's saying, our love for one another is a given, yeah? We love each other. But this terrible thing that's happened, and it is sounding like something really bad's happened between them. I don't know what it was. I mean, it's all going to be guesswork here. He's not revealing that. But he's saying the bad thing that's happened between us doesn't stop us loving each other, but it does rob hours of pleasure that we could be having together. I may not evermore acknowledge thee, lest my bewailed guilt should do thee shame. And this line is the line that makes me think, Shakespeare's done something bad back to the recipient of the sonnet, because he's now saying, look, I can't even acknowledge you anymore. From now on, I can't even acknowledge you. I won't even tip my hat to you in the street, because my guilt would bring shame upon you. And that really makes you think, God, what the hell did Shakespeare do in retaliation? Why is he feeling so guilty? Then he continues with, nor thou with public kindness honour me, unless thou take that honour from thy name. And here he's saying, you can't ever honour me either with public kindness without sort of ruining your own reputation. It's interesting that he says public kindness. So this feels like Shakespeare's done something that is maybe in the public eye potentially. The locals have found out and they're all pissed off at Shakespeare. And so if the recipient of the sonnets acknowledges Shakespeare in public and people go, oh, hold on, is he in a relationship with Shakespeare, or is he friends with Shakespeare? They'll be pissed off. So it seems as if this has sort of gone beyond their private relationship potentially. And maybe the bad thing that Shakespeare has done isn't actually to do with the relationship at all. He's disgraced himself in other ways. Maybe he's done a bit of shoplifting or something like that, or he's written a particularly bad play. Maybe Midsummer Night's Dream wasn't well received by the critics. A couple of 1 stars in there. And that would be embarrassing, wouldn't it? I, for one, know that if a friend gets a bad review for a play that they've written or acted in, I don't want to be associated with them in any way. I definitely don't want to be seen in public with them. That would be incredibly embarrassing and bad for my reputation. And now we finish with the final couplet, which is, but do not so. I love thee in such sort as, thou being mine is thy good report. And here I think he's continuing on the thing about dishonouring the recipient of the poem's reputation, because he's saying, don't do that. Don't ruin your reputation, because I love you so much that I value your reputation as if it were my own. It's as important to me as my own reputation. So don't you dare greet me in public and act as if we know each other, or big me up to your mates in the pub. So there's a lot of intrigue surrounding this sonnet for me. It really makes you wonder what the hell Shakespeare did to ask to break up with this person and say, all the toxic things in our relationship, I need to go away and I need to think about them and harbour them myself, and you can't acknowledge me in the street because it will bring bad vibes to you. Equally, I can't acknowledge you in the street because I'll just feel so guilty. I guess it would be like, seeing your ex-partner in the street and that the relationship ended because you were a bit of an arsehole or something like that, and you bow in your head going, oh no, it's my ex, and you sort of cross the road and they maybe see you but you don't acknowledge them or something like that, I don't know. And the crazy thing is, we'll just never know what Shakespeare did. He could have killed someone. I mean, that would be pretty bad, wouldn't it, if he killed someone? You probably wouldn't want to be associated with him if he'd if he'd killed someone. But you know what? There's a lot of hints to it in his plays. There's a lot of murder and stuff going on in those. Death in loads of his plays. I mean, they say write about what you know, and the stuff in Macbeth where Lady Macbeth has got bloody hands and all that, and she's trying to scrub the blood off. That is, how's he written that without any sort of lived experience of that? I mean, it does make you think, doesn't it? You heard it here first. Shakespeare, potential murderer. So, and on that note, I think it's a good time to continue with our story. If you can't remember what happened in the previous week, shame on you. You should always remember what happened in the previous week because it's such a gripping story. Oh, go on then. I'll give you a quick summary. Shakespeare is on a date with John Donne at Gordano Ramsay's restaurant, and Shakespeare has positioned his frenemy Ben Jonson in the bathroom in case the date isn't going so well and he needs to get some advice. So he's gone to the bathroom to ask some advice from Ben Jonson. He's come back and he's seen bloody John Donne chatting to the waiter, flirting with the waiter, and he can't believe his eyes. He's fuming about it, and he goes back into the bathroom and says, Ben, you won't believe this. He's bloody flirting with the waiter. And Ben says, well, you need to tell him how you feel about that, but don't do it in sonnet form. So Shakespeare naturally writes a sonnet, goes out to the table, and he's just read it to John Donne at the table about how annoyed he is with him flirting with the waiter. And that is where we left off. Let's find out what happens next. Shakespeare finished reading Sonnet 35 to John Donne. John looked at Shakespeare a bit perplexed and said, oh, what that? Oh, that was just a bit of harmless flirting. I'm not going to sleep with him, Shakespeare, don't worry. And Shakespeare said, well, I don't appreciate it, all right. And John says, I think you just need to relax a little bit, to be honest, Bill, and stop writing sonnets about everything. Sometimes it's okay to just say something and not have it written down in a nice little beautiful sonnet. Just say, I don't appreciate you flirting with the waiter, and I'll say, all right, fair enough, I get it. And Shakespeare says, look, I'm sorry, I'm a bit highly strung at the moment. And John says, look, I think you need to relax. Why don't we go back to mine, light a nice little fire, sit on the rug, I'll preach to you a little bit if you want that, and then we'll just go to bed. And Shakespeare says, I do like the sound of that. So Shakespeare says, I'll get the bill. And John says, no, please, let me. It's been an honour to have dinner with you. And the waiter comes over and says, cash or card? And John says, oh, do you take cash? And the waiter says, oh, no, sorry, actually, we don't take cash because of the plague and stuff, and the handling of money is a bit weird now, and it can pass on disease, I think. And John says, well, why did you give me the option? And he said, I don't know, it's just a habit. I'm sorry. And John says, well, all right, I'll pay by card then, obviously. Is tip included? And the waiter says, yeah, 5% tip. Because, of course, 500 years ago, tips were less. After paying, John and Bill get up and head towards the door. Leaving, of course, Ben Jonson in the bathroom on his own. Shakespeare didn't even bother telling him that they were leaving the restaurant. The waiter goes to open the door for the pair of them and says, thank you for coming tonight. And as Shakespeare leaves, he sees the waiter tap John Donne on the bum and slip a note into his pocket. Shakespeare can't believe his eyes, but he pretends he didn't see. John Donne and Shakespeare walk along the Thames, and Shakespeare suddenly says, oh no, I forgot my hat at Gordano Ramsay's. And John says, you weren't wearing a hat. And Shakespeare said, oh no, I definitely was. I definitely had a hat on. It's a big one with a big feather in it, if you remember. And John says, no, I'm almost certain you didn't have a hat. And Shakespeare said, I did, and I need to quickly go back and get it, all right? And John says, oh, fine, I'll wait here. And Shakespeare left, taking the note from John Donne's pocket as he left. And as he walked back to the restaurant, he read the note from the waiter, which said, I had a lovely evening. Let's meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. Shakespeare couldn't believe it. The deceit from both of them. He was fuming. His face grew red and he was consumed with anger. He marched back to the restaurant, which was closed at this point, and he banged on the door. He said, "Let me in! Let me in!" Eventually the waiter came to the door, and Shakespeare said, "Who do you think you are?" And the waiter said, "What's up? Did you have a problem with the meal?" And Shakespeare said, "You know what you've done." And the waiter said, "Look, if he likes me, he likes me. I can't help that." And Shakespeare pushed the waiter hard in his chest. The waiter tumbled backwards and lost his balance, and as he fell through the air, his head hit the edge of a wooden table, and he struck the floor with a thud, blood pouring from his head. Shakespeare said, "Oh my God, what have I done? What have I done?" A couple of chefs from the restaurant rushed out and said, Hey, what's he done? He's killed the waiter." And Shakespeare said, "I'm sorry, it was an accident, it was an accident." And the chef said, "You will pay for this." And Shakespeare started running and running as fast as he could. He sprinted back to the Thames where John was waiting, and Shakespeare said, "I've done something terrible." And John said, "What do you mean? What's happened? Where's your hat?" And Shakespeare said, I killed someone. I killed the waiter. I killed the waiter." And John said, You did what?" And Shakespeare said, "I've got to run. I have to get out of here. I have to go into hiding." And John says, "But Shakespeare." And Shakespeare says, "No time. I still love you, John." And he sprints all the way back to his house, double locks the door, and collapses into his armchair. A day goes by, and Shakespeare hasn't slept a wink. Mercutio brings him the morning paper. The front page in big bold letters. "Disgraced writer, cold-blooded murderer." Shakespeare thinks, "Oh my God, my career, my relationship with John, it's all going to end." And he says to Mercutio, "Fetch my quill." And Mercutio looks up at him wearily and does Shakespeare's bidding. Shakespeare says, "I have to write a break-up note to John, to explain to him never to come to the house again, and he mustn't try to contact me." He finishes writing Sonnet 36, attaches it to Mercutio's collar, and sends Mercutio out into the cold night. Mercutio runs and runs. He knows exactly where to go. Obviously, John Donne's house. It's not that hard to figure out. Eventually he arrives at the house, knocks on the door, and John Donne opens it and says, "Mercutio, where's Shakespeare?" And Mercutio lifts up his paw and hands over Sonnet 36 to John Donne. Sonnet 36. Look, even though we love each other, we have to break up. I can then solely take responsibility for all the shit that's happened between us. It's clear we still love each other, despite this horrible situation, and though it can never break our love, it steals sweet hours of pleasure from us. I can never acknowledge you again, because my guilt would bring shame on you. And you can't ever honour me with kindness in public without ruining your own reputation. Please don't do that. I love you so much that I value your good reputation as much as my own." Well, I bet you didn't see that coming. I certainly didn't. It's like a Christmas episode of EastEnders, isn't it? Anyway, I better go and cook a Christmas turkey and put 7 birds inside that turkey and then put it in a puff pastry called a coffin. Merry Christmas!